Folks, we are going to show you how to delineate a watershed using CalTopo as a handy reference guide. So the first thing you want to do is come up here to Add and click on Line, because you're going to want to highlight your major stream drainage and as many of its little tributaries as you can figure out. So we're going to delineate Rival Creek, a small sub-watershed within the larger South Fork Depuyer Creek watershed. And you got to decide where to start. So we consider that the watershed of Rival Creek starts where it drains right into South Fork Depuyer. So I'm going to start there. And notice that I've snapped to hydro. So up in this upper left-hand corner, you have a choice of options. If you snap to hydro, you'll notice what happens is all the stream drainages get highlighted. And this helps tremendously when you're doing this kind of work. So if you just highlight up here, there you go. Now you've highlighted the entire main stem, or what I would call the main stem of Rival Creek. You could furthermore highlight every single one of its tributaries. And one thing you might want to do is if you have a stream drainage that goes for miles and miles and miles, rather than having to highlight every single little curve of the stream, you could alternatively just draw straight lines up, for each of these. Or even on Rival Creek itself, let me do that again. You can just add lines and you don't have to necessarily follow all these. If you want to just do straight lines, that's fine. The point is you need to be able to see what stream you're working with. So once you've basically identified the entire length of the stream, then what I want you to do is add something that we haven't worked with before, and that is called a polygon. And you're going to see the value of this. So you're going to start, and I would highly recommend you choose a different color for your polygon. And your watershed polygon is going to also start right where Rival Creek drains into its base, which is South Fork Depuyer in this case. So I'm going to click there, and then my task here is to figure out every bit of land that drains into Rival Creek versus anything else. And so the cool thing is that I can just kind of snake along and make some decisions here about differentiating between this side of the hill, which this water is going to drain down into South Fork Depuyer, as opposed to this side of the hill, everything's going to drain down into Rival Creek. And so the cool thing is I'm just snaking between this headwaters and this headwaters. So these two headwaters drain into two different streams. So if I just snake between them, I'm good. So here I have to make some decisions. Here's a headwaters and here's a headwaters. And so how do I split the difference between them? Well, I'm going to come right up this ridge. And then I've got to decide where to go from here. So let's just look. These little drainages are coming down into Blackleaf Creek. That drainage does, and so does that drainage. So I don't want to include this land area here. So I'm going to have to come back this way. And then I'm going to come down and I'm going to sneak between this headwaters and this headwaters, right? So I'm going to come right up this saddle and up to this point. And from there, where should I go? So I'm going to drop down into this saddle, come up here to this point. Why? Because everything here is going to drain down into Blackleaf, whereas everything here is going to drain down into at least the headwaters of Rival Creek, right? How about now? So this headwaters drains down into the East Fork of, I'm not sure what, the Teton River, I gather. So I don't want to come anywhere down in here with my watershed divide. So I'm going to come over here to this peak and keep coming up here. And I'm going to come up here. And do you see how I'm sneaking between this headwaters and this headwaters? So I'm just going to sneak right between the two of them and continue on up this ridge line like so, hitting all these peaks along the way. Where do I go now? So I'm going to come over here, and then I have some decisions because this tributary, right, is the headwaters of the South Fork of Depuyer, but I'm only trying to get the Rival Creek watershed. So I can't follow this stream drainage, but I do want to follow this stream drainage. So I have to sneak right between these two, come right down here, right across this ridge top. Everything here is going to drain down into that stream. Everything here over here is going to drain down into Rival Creek. So I'm going to just keep coming down. And now where do I go? So if I start downstream here, I'm going to go down into the South Fork. So I'm going to have to come across this ridge here and come all the way back. And by the time I get back and I double click, look what happens. I just created a polygon. And the amazing thing here is that every single thing, if I've done it correctly, that's within this blue shaded area should be part of Rival Creek. Any snow that falls on any of this land here is going to melt and drain down into Rival Creek. So what I've done is I've delineated the Rival Creek watershed. You notice that, so if I zoom out a bit, this is a tributary to the South Fork of Depuyer. And I could go along and do all the watershed divides or watershed delineations for every single little tributary to the South Fork of Depuyer, or I could do the entire South Fork. And so if I continue on out my drainage this direction, at some point I'm going to figure out where the South Fork of Depuyer Creek ends up here. And I could begin there and draw the watershed boundaries for the South Fork of Depuyer Creek all the way around. And it would ultimately continue on around this edge and then continue on around and collect all these other tributaries here. So this is like the Russian nesting doll, right? This is the smallest one inside the much larger drainage of the South Fork of Depuyer.